Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on a sunny Sunday afternoon. We're all here to talk about a topic that's quite relevant in the current situation on presentation skills, media training, and the do's and don'ts of virtual meetings. We are focusing primarily on A-level students who are applying to university to study medicine. We understand that the traditional way of face-to-face interviews will not be happening in certain universities. It's going to be done in a similar format like we're doing now over Zoom. So we just wanted to sort of equip you with the necessary skills so you can really perform and excel at your virtual interviews, so you're able to successfully get a place to study medicine. I'm delighted and honoured to be joined by a number of people that will be helping us today. I will let each of them introduce themselves in due course. Just like to introduce my co-hosts, Mr. Shakeel Puri and Dr. Irfan Rashid. If you would like to introduce yourself, start off with yourself, Mr. Shakeel Puri.
Once again, Apps UK welcomes all the participants and the presenters on this very important and timely topic of the advanced communication and presentation skills. Apps UK, for the people who are joining us the first time, is the medical organization based in the United Kingdom. We've been helping with education, teaching, coaching to the medical professionals, working at every level in the United Kingdom for over 1.5 decades. This is one of the series of the webinars we've been providing on a weekly basis, sometimes bi-weekly basis, to the professionals who are working within the NHS and people who are watching us. We have had reports from all across the across the globe, especially in the last few webinars. We've been having reports have been watched from well over 27 countries. Today's topic is quite important. We are, as a medical organization, going to give tips and skills to people who are going to go into the profession. And I'm very proud of Apps UK team to collaborate and get a very highly skilled and seasoned presenters who are going to join and present from the various parts of the United Kingdom. On behalf of the Apps UK, as a president of the association, I welcome all of you and hope to learn from our panelists alongside the presenters. Over to you, Doctor. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And we also have Ali as co-host as well. I don't think Ali we have here. Is it Saeed Ali Raza? So Ali, if you can hear me, if you can introduce yourself as well as a co-host.
Yeah, I am a medical oncologist right now working at Dewsbury, and I am a medical educationist as well, and it have been conducting courses about PACEs. So over to you.
Thank you. I forgot to introduce myself, my credentials. As my name is Dr. Shafiq. A lot of you might have seen me over the past couple of weeks when we've been doing the virtual work experience, but for those that are new here today, I'm a GP based in Bolton. I've also interviewed for universities in the past. I'm also a GMC PAB examiner as well, and I've got a keen interest in medical education. So we will start off with Suhail Shuktai. So if I can let you introduce yourself and start off with your stuff. Thank you.
Much I appreciate the preference given the program. It's a very tight program. I want to keep myself very brief. 15 minutes presentation. I'm an orthopedic surgeon based in England, in London, and also a medical legal examiner. At the same time, I did my Microsoft PowerPoint certification back in 2001, and I've been training in PowerPoint, and I've done about more than 80 one-day PowerPoint courses in different medical universities in 5 or 6 countries, including Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, America, Britain, UAE, and England. My other role is being a digital health and telemedicine director for LPPS UK. So I want to start now, and let's use this time in a more efficient way. So what we're discussing today is how to create PowerPoint presentations PowerPoint is the medium and how to create medical presentations using PowerPoint. So there's a science behind it, and then there is a methodology. So I want to touch briefly on this topic. Anatomy of a PowerPoint presentation. What makes a PowerPoint presentation? First of all, let's say tomorrow you have a PowerPoint presentation, or the next week, you're given a topic. I normally visualize my topic. I see that topic in front of me as a picture. And that topic could be knee pain. I could see a man walking with knee pain, and I want to understand what people want to know about knee pain. Who is the audience? The second part is who is the audience? Is the audience junior medical fraternity or a senior medical fraternity? For junior medical fraternity, you would like not to give information, but experience. Sorry, for a junior medical fraternity, you want to give instructional presentation, like a differential diagnosis of knee pain, for instance. But if the audience is senior, you want to share experience because they already have the knowledge. Then decide the type. Your presentation could be instructional presentation where you want to show on the slide a process, or it could be opinion-based presentation where you want to share an experience. You don't have to show the process. So you would need less stuff on your slides if your presentation is more for experienced people, because they want to know your experience rather than the process details. But for a junior level, you need to go into process details. Then organize the content. I normally make a folder on my computer and start putting everything into that. It could be an email, it could be a slide, a PDF file, a news cutting, a picture, a point, even a voice recording, I think of that. So I put that every content into one folder and then start linking my slides from that. Then of course, before I start doing it, before this, I'm in the planning phase. In the planning phase, I will choose a theme and fonts, and I'll show you what is the technique behind it. Then comes the process of making a presentation. In that, I would personally do last slide first, because this is the take-home message. And I want to anchor myself what I'm going to leave at the end of my talk. Let's do that first. And then the whole presentation of mine is based on that last slide in my mind, that am I getting that message across? So I suggest that you try this and see how much focused you will be. Create subtopics list. Then I would make list of the topics in my presentation, subtopics. Then elaborate each topic as one presentation. When you're making one topic, a discussion, that is the only thing you're thinking about. You're not thinking about other subtopics. So try and focus on one topic at a time. That can also allow you a better time management. Then mix your text with media, stills, audios, videos, so that you break the monotony of text. Then of course, the other part is that you professional conduct on the stage, and then your professional knowledge should reflect. It should be evidence-based conversation. And then a bit of humor in that would also help. Now, what is required to be an effective presenter? First of all, the primemost thing is hands-on knowledge of your topic. Are you working as a hired wisdom, like you've read about it, but you haven't tried it? That's a totally different ball game, because somebody will knock your feet off by an awkward question. Best present what you've actually done. Second thing is, can you connect with the people? Can you look into people's eyes, or can your voice capture that audience? These are skills beyond being a medical presenter. They would mean your socializing skills, how good communicator you are. And that is not to do with a medical presentation. The next part is, of course, the knowledge of the medium, whether you're using a simple JPEG slide viewer or a PowerPoint or Prezi. There's so many softwares. PowerPoint is one of the most common one. So I'll stick myself to PowerPoint today. Now, what are the important considerations which I want to share with you today would be, first of all, when you make a slide, please do not put more than 5 bullet points. Please do not put more than 5 bullet points. I can repeat it once more. Please do not put more than 5 bullet points in one slide. And that is maximum. Now, 5 words in one slide, one bullet point. Do not make a sentence. Do not put prepositions that he will do that. No. Make a statement like PowerPoint changes medical perspective presentations, like vaccine arrival can change COVID. So put a statement, no prepositions, no is, no are. Don't make a sentence where you have to put a full stop at the end. That's not a bullet point, by the way. Then when you have 5 text heavy slides consecutively, make sure the next slide is an image slide. Otherwise, it's been research proven that people after 5 text slides try to look away and want to take a natural break. And then of course there should be a readability, a contrast between the fonts and the background. You won't be putting pink fonts over a white background or yellow against white. And remember one thing, whenever you do a presentation, you are the presenter, not your slides. And that is where things go wrong. When we put our slides before us. I'm going to reiterate that a little more later on. Now, making an impression, how do you do that? By putting yourself first and let you lead the slides. And as this is a research now, that your knowledge is 90% of the people, the impression you leave on the audience. Whereas your people skill is 75% contributory to your impression. Whereas your PowerPoint skills, you don't need a lot of PowerPoint skills. Only 60% of that matters. Now, there are do's and don'ts for engaging medical presentations. You may notice that engaging medical presentations is constantly, if I go to previous slide, one thing is static. That is engaging medical presentations. And that's my theme. So I want to put that on every slide. And you see the position is not moving. The position of engaging medical presentations is not moving. It's locked because I want you to understand this is what I want to leave. This is the topic of my presentation. So the do's are, of course, your content must be readable. You cannot put a whole page of a book on that and understand and assume that people have read it. It should be authentic. Either you've got a literature reference or you've done it. You should be able to connect with the audience. And then things we need to avoid are the don'ts. Information overload. We keep saying it, and this is so important. Then distractions on the slide, like too many animations, right and left, boxes dropping and slides moving away and all the whoosh sounds and all that. They are distractions. And then conflicting yourself, like saying that, oh, I'm sorry, this is not what I meant, or saying, perhaps. If it's your material, you can't say perhaps on your own material. You can give opinion, but you can't say maybe on what you put on your slides. You have to be very assertive. Now, the technical side of it. It's too short time for me to go into technicalities. I mean, I take normally 1 to 2 days to explain PowerPoint. Now, this part is good. You can see the text over the background. Look at the lower part. That's awful, isn't it? You can't read white over yellow. And then very busy backdrop, and then shady backdrop. This is a bit punchy, but quite strong. But too many slides of black and white can actually tire the visual capacity of people in the audience. So choose a background which can make your theme of the presentation. I normally choose a background which is the background of most of my pictures. If my images are X-rays, I usually choose a blue and a gray. If my images are pictures, I usually choose yellow and white. So for example, this backdrop is suitable for when your presentation has natural ambient pictures, like outdoor pictures. Whereas if it's a medical material like ECGs, X-rays, other 3 backgrounds could be suitable. Especially when you are presenting in a place when there is daylight coming into the hall, try and use a darker background. When the daylight is there in the auditorium, try and use a darker background. Now, which one is bad slide? Let's talk one-to-one now. Left or the right? In my view, it's left because if I have to stop and read all that, I might consume more time. And if I skip it to save time, people have lost it. This slide is a better one on the right-hand side. Now, this is a bad slide, but I want to actually go through this one because this very bad slide has very important points. The text on the slide is more than what your audience can read. That is too bad. You can't have this situation and then impress the audience. Audience is not sitting in a library reading a book. Instead they've come to listen to you. You can't disrespect their time by asking them to read a whole page of the slide and then move on quickly before they've read it. So spelling errors like this and wrong grammar will annoy your audiences, like this is a wrong grammar, audience. So inconsistent format is not pleasing to eyes, just like this. Do you want to be an audio aid to your slides? Ask yourself this question, that are you reading your slides? So that means your slides are the presenter and you are just a voice narrator. Do you want that role? Slides are visual aid to you. Please remember, they are following you, not you're following them. The literature support to my point is enormous. Here are 2 paragraphs from Harrison to support my point. If you cannot read, go home and open page number 243 and read the book. You did not need to come to listen to me. That is what we do. We put whole pages of book in the presentations, and then we say, I've given the information to people. No, you have not. You've actually disappointed them. And that is difference between good and bad presenter and good and bad slide. Now, just take a look at this slide. Take a look at this slide, and let's say it's my slide, and I am the presenter, and I'm expecting you to read that. And suddenly I remember the snaring eyes of the host, like no time left. So I say, quickly move on like this. What will be your face? Touch that face on your screens, the right or the left. I'm touching the face on the right if I'm the audience. I don't think anybody would touch the face on the left. You'll be totally unpleased and dissatisfied with this presenter. So this is a scheme I do. I normally start, I divide my presentation into four or five subtopics. I write them on the left-hand side. I put an image which is thematic for my presentation, and then put the topic of my presentation and sub-theme right here. So that's my introduction slide to my topic, and that subtopics on the left-hand side. And then I duplicate that on PowerPoint, and then I create a next slide, and then I make it gray, and then change this image according to that topic. And then I could duplicate that slide and make it gray and put another image according to that topic. Then I duplicate it and so forth till I complete my subtopics. Now, I'm not preparing presentation yet. I am creating bridges between the topics of my presentation. Then I will use these 4 slides between my subtopics, so I can keep my audience anchored to my presentation. That if I move from one topic to another, they will see that I've already spoken about another topic in just a few minutes ago. So I keep my audiences anchored as I move along and navigate. Normally I tell them that I'm on slide number 18. They see that. In the beginning, I'll tell them I'm going through 25 slides. So they know that the end is not far. And believe me that PowerPoint has a lot more. I mean, today is too short time for me, so I'm just closing my presentation. I just want to show you one little element that how can within PowerPoint you can create an animated pointer. For example, I want to illustrate this lesion. I've just created this dot, and within PowerPoint, this is a PowerPoint slide. I'll click and take a look. And you can all do that. It's not difficult. Then this ECG, for example. And then this angiogram. So this is all very, very basic stuff in PowerPoint. And if I had time, I could have gone through a lot more detail. But today is not a technical discussion. Today is just trying to express that please remember the basic rules. People are there to listen to you. They are not there to watch slides unless you're explaining a very, very instructional concept. Then you can go in details. So be a presenter and be a leader of your slides rather than an oral narrator of your slides. Thank you very much. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chugtai. That was a very interesting talk. I mean, having gone through university and training and listened to hundreds of presentations, it really sends home some of the messages that you do say. One of the things that, I was just reflecting on your talk is, whenever I've sat in presentations, is if the presenter is just verbalizing what's on the slide, it's hard to read or listen to. You want to do one or the other. And I think your message is having 5 simple things with 5 just words per point. It tells the presenter, it reminds him what to talk about, and then people will be focused on the presenter, not on the screen. And I think that's one thing that's really important. Sometimes when people are saying what's on the presentation, sometimes in my mind I'm saying, can I just read your slide, because it's very text heavy. So it's just a really good point. But thank you very much for that.
I just want to make one point, that if you're able to give your presentation to people in paper, you actually have not presented. You've given them a manual. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will be welcoming questions, so if you want to ask any questions, you can click on the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom bar, and we will try and get through what we can if time allows at the end. Next, we have Shuja Ali, who's a chairman of Asian Sound Radio. Next, just to welcome you. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much indeed, the Dr. Party, absolutely fabulous. Thank you, Dr. Chugtai, absolutely fabulous presentation. To be honest, I'm flabbergasted because I don't know where to start. My presentation's not as good as yours. Your leadership was fabulous. Some real great reminders there, unbelievable. But I'm going to just talk about a little bit about sound, because obviously I'm from the sound broadcasting world. And just give you 2 or 3 top tips this afternoon. So welcome everybody. Thank you for obviously joining such a wonderful seminar and presentation. What I tend to find, although I work with HR and recruitment all the time, I think people who are prepared when they attend interviews primarily are well organized with microphones. I actually don't have my microphone here today as such, but there are so many microphones in the market these days that can make you sound so much better when you are on a Zoom call or an interview call with any type of job, role, interview, whatever it may be in your lifetime. And I do think, just as Dr. Chugtai has been speaking about the visuals of the audience, I would say the sound of the audience just is as important, of getting that actually right and across to your audience, and making sure you can engage with them and connect with them, which I think is the important thing in that protest play. So that's one of our top tips. The other one is really dressing well and being prepared, because actually we're, again, from the commercial world where I live and work, we notice all the small things from the big ones. Who's actually made the preparation, who's actually made the effort, who's actually smiling the way they're smiling. Body language is a massive, massive thing. It is unbelievable how, especially owners in business, pick up that little thing, and it is absolutely critical, ladies and gentlemen. And really, finally, for me, be yourself. Once you've got yourself some great technical microphones, you're wearing good clothes, you've got a great smile on, be yourself and deliver well, be confident. Honestly, you'll be surprised that sometimes yourself, the type of leadership and personal development you have to be able to deliver to anybody. Mine is a very short and sweet 3 top tips for presentation today, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a pleasure to be on this wonderful call. So thank you very much for inviting me, and of course, Asian Sound Radio. Back over to yourself, Atif.
Thank you very much, Shuja Ali. I'll certainly lend a point there. I need to upgrade my microphone, as do a lot of the doctors here as well. It sounds as if you're in my living room here with me.
I can send you one out if you want.
Thank you. I think my practice is actually, our CCG is actually funded some, so we've actually got one, but it's at my surgery. Next, we have Umar Khan. Next, so he is a chief superintendent of Greater Manchester Police. So as doctors, we often get scared when police officers are knocking on our doors, but we've got some very good advice from Mr. Umar Khan. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Hi, Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everyone. If listeners are wondering what have we got a police officer doing on this call, just a quick background. Aside from being a serving police officer for Greater Manchester Police, I'm an independent advisor to the Royal College of GPs, and I'm also a lay member of the MRC GP Examination Board. And aside from that, my other occupational responsibilities include being an assessor on the executive program that we have within our organization. I'm absolutely grateful to be on this call and listening to so many wonderful and highly qualified people. I've already learned so much from our previous two presenters. I've been asked very briefly to talk about approach to giving media interviews, and I feel a little bit humbled because we have Brother Shujaj Ali here from Asian Sounds Radio, and I will stand corrected at any time should he wish to correct me in terms of some of the things I will talk about. So in terms of the media interviews, primarily it tends to be middle to senior managers in organizations, consultants, doctors, who would be expected to give media interviews. There are various different types of interviews, but the two I will just briefly focus on would be one, which will be a nice, friendly, cohesive, collaborative Q&A of the sort that Brother Shujaj on Asian Sounds Radios will be all about, where it will be nice and informal conversations around sharing good knowledge or information or practice to the public. The other ones, which are more common and slightly more challenging, is where after a critical incident or a situation of crisis, as a senior lead for your organization, you'll be expected to go and front the media and give an account. So if I just give a couple of thoughts on that particular type of interview, is that first of all, before the interview, you need to be thinking, what is the purpose of this interview? Why is it that you are taking part in this interview? And my first tip will be for you to write down very brief and short 3 key objectives as to 3 key messages that you want to impart during that interview. Against each of those objectives, you need to have at least 3 facts. So if you explored and you probed and you ask questions about those particular objectives, that you can give some evidence that you already have prepared. Secondly, you also need to be thinking about the difficult issues or the questions that you can expect. And you need to be thinking ahead of the interviewer, because it shouldn't come as a shock and a surprise if you asked a difficult question. A common one I tend to experience in my role will be about where a failing has taken place, and the question will be along the lines of, officer, are you going to apologize for what you have done or what your organization has done? Clearly, there's going to be legal implications as to how you respond to a question like that, but what you can't do is not answer the question. So in a situation like that, it may be that your organization may have advised you that at this stage, you're unable to issue an apology or something like to that effect. So what you can do is answer the question by saying, look, I deeply regret the events that have taken place. We are going to establish the facts of this investigation, and we'll make them available, and we will learn the lessons of the findings. So you can actually answer something which will be acceptable, but not necessarily going to make an apology, because clearly you might not be in a position to make an apology. Finally, before the interview, you have to understand who are your audiences. So often for me, I would say is that, first of all, it could be the people who have been directly impacted by a course of action, in this case, a medical settings. It could be some form of failure within hospitals or consultants. So you've got patients who are impacted by that action. Secondly, you have to give due regard to the oversight bodies who, in the medical sense, GMC, health and safety executive, and so on and so forth. And thirdly, about the wider public. So these are all the things that you ought to do before you go into the interview. And I'm just going to conclude very quickly with what some of the things that you need to think. Just 3 things I'll mention, and I'll finish here because I appreciate we don't want to give a very long-winded, top-heavy conversation here. So during the interview, what you can expect the first question to be an open question. It will give you an opportunity to set the scene, give some facts. So I use a couple of acronyms really that help me to keep on message. I use what I call the 3 C's. The 3 C's is that C number 1 is concern. I want to first and foremost express concern about what has happened. So it could be that I deeply regret what has happened. My heartfelt condolences or sympathies are with the victims or the families affected. Secondly, you want to show commitment. The commitment is that you as the leader in that role is that you are absolutely committed to supporting the people who are impacted and committed to learning from what has gone on and committed to putting things right. And thirdly, you want to show control, because there's nothing that will dent confidence more than having somebody in authority in a hospital settings or a public service who do not demonstrate authority. So this is where, after very critical incidents, you'll hear people on the media saying things like that. We have got our best people on this. We have our specialists, trained officers or doctors or consultants dealing with these situations. We're putting extra resources into the place to deal with this. So that's basically, you're showing your commitment. So that's the 3 C's. So you're showing concern, you're expressing commitment, and you're showing control of the situation. And finally, the other mnemonic that I would tend to advocate for people to consider using is ABC. So you will be asked a difficult question, perhaps a question that you don't want to answer, but you will have to answer that question. But that's the A, answer the question. But connect it with the B, which is the bridge. Bridge is probably where you want to take and give your key message. So use the bridge by using words like, yes, I accept this has happened. However, that's the bridge. What I would like to say is that we are absolutely committed to, and that's the C, A, B, and C, where you give your comment and you give your key message that you want to give. And finally, people always remember what you have said at the start and what you will say at the end. So it's very important at the end of your interview that you conclude with a positive message. It could be an appeal, it could be a reassurance, but it's a message that you want to give to finish on a positive note. So I just want to say, on that note, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody on Facebook who have joined today to listen in, and happy during the Q&A to answer any very specific questions around assessments, and for A-level students who are going for interviews, if they've got any questions around interview styles or techniques, they're happy to answer any of those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Umar Khan, for that talk. I think something that just resonated with me is the similarities that the police department have with the medical profession as well, especially when it comes to complaints. I remember something you've got to bear in mind is not, you can't prevent every negative outcome, but it's about how you deal with those. I went on a course a year ago about complaints, and very similar thing to what Mr. Umar Khan says is that the thing that I remember is two words: sad but glad. I'm sad that this event has happened, but I'm glad you brought it up so we can do something about it. And that's the general focus of the interviews, of the response to the complaint. And about the skills that you were just mentioning about how you need to respond to questions that you're asked, so even if there's uncomfortable questions. Personally, when I used to watch the Downing Street training briefings or question time or Good Morning with Piers Morgan, you know, there's a wealth of information that you learn from politicians when they're essentially forced to answer questions that they don't really want to answer, and you learn a lot about how they answer that. So for anyone that's looking for first time to see how that happens, just watch any of those kind of programs and you learn from it. So yeah, as I said earlier on, any questions that you guys want to ask, please please put your questions in the Q&A section. You can direct it to any particular person on the panel. We will try and get through those. Got Arif Shamim next, who's a producer and presenter of BBC Urdu Service. So honoured to have him. So over to you.
Thank you very much for having me in this discussion. Actually, I will make it very, because much has been already said, so I'll make it very simple, as it is for students who are going to uni. So first thing I'll tell them is check your equipment, because when we interview somebody, so for the first thing we do is we check our laptops, which we 10-15 minutes ago we'll call them and check their equipment also. So it is because their future depends on this interview. Actually, this is a very important interview of their life. So they don't want to be rejected for some glitch in the computer, or voice can they can't reach and things like this. So my first tip is always ensure your internet connection is okay and the audio and video thing is okay. Light, sometimes if they can't see you properly, they can't see your my friend as Shujat has just told us that sound is very important. So sound is very important, as well as even light. If they can't read your face or communicate through your eyes, and they'll when they're making decisions, they count these small things which sometimes we ignore. Dress is very important, and the most basic things that we forget during interviews, that where to put your laptop, where to put your phone if you're being interviewed on phone. So it's always, if you don't have to look down, you don't have to look up. So it's always better to, if it is, to put some books underneath your laptop so they can see you. So these are the things actually. I think for me, as I've been in this business for more than 35 years. So these are the things that we check. The person who is talking, if the person, even if he talks great, whatever he has to show, but if it can't reach to the other end, then it's futile. It's a futile exercise. So these basic things, I think one needs to be aware of. And I think many of my friends have said almost all other things that I wanted to say. So it's always better to practice with your friend, whatever you for your interview, because looking at in the camera, it is different than talking to somebody in person. So it's always better to practice on camera also. So I think I'll not take much of your time. So I think this is the advice that I can give to my these younger people. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much for that, Arif. Just something that I was telling one of my colleagues the other day who got a webcam from the local CCG board, and they didn't know how to test it. And I looked into this, and you can just Google webcam test. The first top few links, just open it, and it'll just come up as if you're a person on the other side with a video, and you can actually record your voice on the mic and then play it back so you can see how it hears on the other side. And I've actually started using that whenever I use a new device, just to test out how it works. So thank you very much for that, Arif Shamim. I'm just going to hand over to Dr. Abdul Hafiz. He is the founder and the CEO of Apps UK. None of us would be here today without the hard work of Dr. Hafiz. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think what a fascinating evening. As you can appreciate, the types of tips which we are getting here is like the essence. You will read a whole book, and we are just giving you all those points within few seconds. This COVID has actually given us a lot of opportunities, and one of the opportunities is this digital world, which we are all forced into. And I don't need to go into too much detail of, everything is in front of you. And I thought this is important that we actually highlight some of those issues. What I would like you to do is, obviously, because we've been running these webinars for last nearly 4 or 5 months, and there are lots of things which we have noticed, and we obviously picked on, and we guide. Whenever we have a webinar, we have a discussion, and we have banned certain words. And one of those words is, can you hear me? Can you see my slides? I'm just using these words because these become too much rhetoric, because we are not trained to doing things. A lot of times we do, obviously we are still on mute, we start chatting,
and it looks a bit awkward every time if somebody has to stop you, and then there's a disruption in terms of what you are about to say. When we obviously share our slides, rather than saying, can you see my slides, you just go ahead and start the presentation, because it just look monotonous and rhetoric, and we see them, too many times. So this is like, these are new words in our dictionaries which have suddenly cropped up, and obviously we should use them carefully. And then, for example, if a meeting is going on like this, there should be only one host controlling, rather than everyone sitting, all the panelists say, we can't hear you. So that responsibility should be given to one person, and that looks more professional and it will run smoothly. In terms of the interviews, when obviously you go, and obviously we have some very senior journalists and producer and experts in their field who are sitting here. I'm not trained into any of that. I mean, lots of things which I'm going to mention are just my observations. And first of those is the first impression. When you are sitting on a panel and you're going to be obviously interviewed, the impression which you make, sometimes there are lots of things we do not even realize. We do an examiner, as soon as you're connected, an examiner will look at your face and they will make an impression. Making that impression only takes seconds. It might be just 3 seconds, 5 seconds. The impression you have created will last. It is very difficult to change that impression. Unless you do something exceptionally good or exceptionally bad, that impression will stick with you. And in the examiner's mind as well, when they are going to, and it's two ways. When we look at the examiner, we make an impression about them as well. And that impression, again, obviously, determines in terms of how we go. We might say, oh my God, this looks like very strict examiner. So you have actually already synthesized something, but this is based on some observations. Everyone is very clever, and we can very quickly pick up on the situation in terms of what we expect, and we just accordingly, phrase our questions. Second is what we wear. How is our background? We know universities have said this year that they will ask everybody to use a blank background or artificial background. So people cannot judge you based on what is behind you. So they just focus on you, your personality, and so on. But I would like all of you, people who are watching on Facebook, people who are on the live call here, just to look at all the panelists here. If you look at Dr. Irfan Rashid and see the presentation, the clothes he has worn, the way he is sitting, it's just creating an impression, as opposed to Dr. Syed Ali Raza, as opposed to me. Okay, so obviously just the clothes which we are wearing makes a huge impression. Even without saying anything, we look at the face and we say, my God, Mr. Shakeel Puri looks very impressive. This is the first thing. What you wear on that day, it has to be professional. And number two is the light. Okay, just have a look what happens to my face now, just for a second. This is the lighting in the room, which is on my fingertips. So rather than having a light behind you, if you sit in a room and there is a window behind you, your face will automatically turn dark. This is a lighting in the room. You should never be facing that way. The window should be in front of you, so your face is well lit. And those are small tips which can actually make a huge impression even before we have said a single word. And then the body language. Previously, when they were face-to-face interviews, you will actually go and sit in front of the examiners. Examiners can see how your body is moving, your hand movement, the way you are sitting. But this time, there is a very small window. The examiner will probably just be looking at your face and where you see. Okay, I've seen in our previous teaching sessions with students. Okay, now look at my face as well. A lot of times I've just seen students looking around, and then they are talking, looking at the ceiling, and they're talking. Okay, so if I'm talking to you, I should not be looking on anyone on the screen. I will be looking on the camera, because I know now I'm looking in your eyes. And that just body posture gives a very different impression to the examiner. That shows you're confident, that shows you know what you're doing and where to look. And the last point I would make is make sure you practice. Okay. The Apps UK is conducting interview preparation courses. In all these courses, we will give you a lot of practice in terms of how to handle these Zoom calls and so on. So there's a lot more to come. I think I'll stop here and we'll have some Q&As. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Hafiz. I'd just like to reiterate some of the points that you were saying. It's absolutely vital that you get this right. And having done interviews myself for prospective medical students, and done over 100 of them, the interview starts right from the start, even before you enter the room, and they normally would welcome you in. And just like you're saying, anything, the first impressions count, and whatever happens afterwards is, unless things go exceptionally well or exceptionally bad, that perception is very difficult to change. So I just wanted to ask my co-host, is there anything that you guys would like to add before we go over to the Q&A sections?
Yes. As I have been teaching communication skills for the PACES, MRCP PACES students, so some of the tips which I give to them, and I want to share here with the A-level students as well. Do buy a new dress, or do wear the best dress you have. This really boosts the confidence. And because when you feel good, you are confident always. And even if it is a virtual interview, do this thing, this will help you. Second thing, don't stumble and remain truthful. If you don't know an answer, simply say no so that they can ask you another question. And you will then get time to play and to show your performance. If you stumble and you try to make stories, this will just waste your time and put a bad impression of you. So these are the two things which I observed and wanted to share. Thank you.
Dr. Irfan, want to say something?
I think there isn't anything much I can add. One thing which Hafiz Bhai mentioned, practice, practice, practice. Okay, so just don't come on the day that we'll see what they answer. Just practice, practice, practice. That practice makes man perfect. That's the experience.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I
Thank
think
you.
I'd just like to reiterate what Dr. Ali Raza said, and Dr. Karashi said, you need to practice as much as you can. Thankfully, you guys have time on your side to a degree at the moment, because the interviews won't happen for at least a good 2 months at the very earliest. So you do have time. Having done interviews myself for lots of students, but my general tip is try and enjoy it if you can. On reflection, the students that I've marked down who've done well, I could tell that they were enjoying the interview. It was a two-way conversation. The ones that struggled were the ones that gave a very long answer and it was waffle, waffle, waffle. It's better to cut your answer short and just, like as I was saying, just so you're not sure. The interview will guide you to the next step. You might clarify or rephrase a question, and that might prompt you to give an appropriate answer. Just so don't waffle and try and enjoy the interview, make it conversational in two-way.
One thing, Atif, I forgot to mention. I think for you guys, I think make a video of yourself doing the presentation, talking. If there is nobody around you, just talk to yourself, make a video, and then look at this video again and again and see what you have done and how you can improve it.
And for the youngsters in the audience, even when I was preparing for my MRCGP examinations, many hours of recordings, went through it with my supervisor and just break down every little thing, even me holding a pen and fiddling with it. He said, why are you doing that? So just got rid of it. And, so video yourself. You don't know what kind of behavior you're doing until you watch yourself back. So thank you to all the panelists today. It's been an honor having you here. We're going to move over to the Q&A section. I'm sure any discussions that we have in the Q&A will stimulate more questions. So please, for any audience members, please ask any questions. We're just sort of towards the latter section of the presentation today. We've got a question from Alia Riazia, who says, how can we use body language and facial expressions to present ideas when answering questions through online interviews? Is there any of the panelists that want to answer this question?
I can take this.
Yeah, of course.
Right? The body language is when you're speaking truth, when you're speaking honest, and when you're speaking of your experience, really you don't need to think about body language that time. Body language is required usually when you are trying to hide your weakness or you're trying to read someone else's literature. Let me elaborate that. It could be a controversial statement, but I want to elaborate that. When you're speaking truth and when you're speaking of your own experience, your own knowledge, basically your hands start moving, your face starts glittering, your eyes lock, your voice raises, your body becomes alert, you become passionate. And that is the body language. You convey through your body, through your words. Even if you don't know the language of that person, you will try and convey that point. So the body language is drawn into the passion of your conversation. But if you don't have first-hand knowledge of that particular topic you're being talking about, fine, then it's all grammatical, it's all mathematical. Your shoulders should be in the middle of the screen. If you're looking on one side, there should be 2/3 space which side you're looking at, and 1/3 space here. That's called as breathing space. Your head should be not more than a palm's width below the screen, if that's online. And then your voice should not have a lot of accent or expressions. It should be very methodical, very kind of a straightforward answer without any emotions. But that may or may not leave an impression, but that will convey the information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Umar Khan. You've been conducting interviews at very senior level. I think I would like to just change the focus slightly, because we have a lot of consultants who go for interviews. In terms of what do you see when you take executive interviews, what will be your advice in terms of, or your observations, what you have seen in terms of, senior doctors?
Yeah, the board tends to be the decisive stage for appointments, really. So you may have an assessment center leading up to it, where your presentation skills, your engagement skills. So the key thing for the interviews is that at that consultant's level is that you're going for a very strategic role. So you have to pitch your answer, not in the role that you have been doing, but for the role that you're doing. So it's elevating yourself at that strategic level. And the other distinction between executive interviews and say non-executive interviews is the types of questions. So in a non-executive interview, you will probably get a lot of competency-based questions, which will be looking at reflective experiences, examples, evidence that you have collected previously. But in an executive role, you probably will be getting quite a fair share of forward-facing questions, which will be asking you to explain and demonstrate how you as a senior leader in the role you're applying for will bring about leadership and change. And there will be the two very brief distinctions that I would say that the executive interview would differ from, say, a competency-based interview for a very specific post or a role.
Thank you. Just one more question, Mr. Arif Shamim. You have years and years or decades of experience of presenting as well as producing programs. How can we get out of a difficulty? For example, if something goes wrong, it can be anything, a glitch on the technical side or something. How would you approach, or what will be your advice in terms of coming out of that difficult situation?
Yeah, I just add one thing. For example, when you go for interview, so you always have to have a backup plan. For example, sometimes line drops, so it is always better to give them your Skype ID also, or phone number, so that they can call you on audio. So it is always better to have a backup plan rather than have nothing. And this is I think one of the glitches that we face when we are interviewing somebody, line drops and then it's blank. So if you have backup plan, you have another guest in the studio, then you call them. And as is being mentioned, that it's better, to not only to speak well, but to listen well also. So listening is also part of the process. If you are not listening, for example, one of our colleagues was talking about body language. So body language, if you're not listening, if you're nodding, for example, when you nod, it means that you are listening to somebody. If you don't nod, that sometimes you look blank. and it's not a good impression to the other person that you are even not looking at them and you look blank also. So I think speaking and even listening is both are important in interviews.
Gigi, thank you. Mr. Shakeel Puri, you are the man who always guide us in terms of where to look, where to keep the camera and the height and the camera angle and so on. Please, we would like to hear those tips from you as well.
Well, very impressive tips today from very experienced people. I think I would just highlight and build up from what you said about impressions. It is all about impressions, and I must also touch on two things which I think were not mentioned. One of them is the unspoken communication. The way you walk in, the way you sit down, the way you actually have your body posture. We need to remember the interviewers, the panels, they're all important. So when you talk to the ones who's asking the questions, instead of just looking at them, you need to look and give the importance to the rest of the panelists. Mostly, when you are talking to somebody or communicating to somebody, people are actually looking into your eyes. So eyes tell a lot. I mean, this is my profession, the eyes, but I must say the empathetic eye, the happy eye, the professional interest you show when somebody is communicating with you is quite important during an interview. I'm happy to carry on learning from this very impressive and experienced panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shakeel Puri. I've certainly learned a lot from our very experienced panelists here. And just reflecting on what you were just saying, Mr. Puri, when I've done interviews before, the interviews are in different corners of the room. So, well, you'd give your answer primarily to the main interview asking the question. You'd glance at the other interviewer, but how do you do that on Zoom? You've just got a webcam. My webcam's at the top of my screen, so when I look at the panel, it looks like I'm looking down at everyone. And if I go through the 9 panelists that I can see here, it's very hard for the panelists to see that I'm looking at everyone. But this is something that we can go over in detail in our interview course. But from anyone in particular, have you got any suggestions about how do you respond? Because most of the interviews will probably have more than one interview. How do you show attention to the second interviewer from an eye contact point of view?
I think it's quite difficult to have an eye contact, as you rightly said. One point which I mentioned, some of the devices have camera at the bottom, So obviously if you're looking at the camera, for example, if camera is on the bottom, then, your facial impressions are different. And some iPads have camera looking there. So even if you're looking at the camera, and it's very difficult to see the screen, it causes confusion. And these are the things which you need to refine before the interview in your practice sessions, how you come across, on the screen. Where do you look? Is your camera at the right place? And is your height is correct? A lot of times we just leave the mobile phone quite lower down, or it's not fixed on one place, it's wobbly, it keeps shaking. Times we also confuse between, whether we are putting camera sideways or upwards, which distort the screen, and the view changes. Obviously, these are the things which you need to practice on in your own interview.
Thank you for that, Dr. Please. Just something that Mr. Arshami was saying about having a backup for glitches. I think for the students here, you need to bear in mind that the examiners most likely will be university staff or doctors, and the interview day is on a very tight schedule. So certainly face-to-face interviews, it's boom, 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 one after another. So just something that happened to me a couple of months ago when I was doing a talk, my little one, he just turned off the broadband. It takes a minute or two to boot up and get connected again. So have a backup plan. Perhaps have a mobile phone with tethering, hotspots. Like Mr. Shamim was saying, give them other contact details at the start, just in case there's a glitch and they can't get in touch with you, because the interviews will wait a few minutes and then they might just put down as you're not able to get back in touch with the interviewee due to technical issues, and we'll move on to the next interview. So give a backup way to get back in touch. We've just got one other question, last one. What is the best dress comprised of, and what colours for this moment. I'll give a chance for one of the panelists to answer this in a moment. I actually wrote an article on this, how do you do this on Zoom, and this was a couple of months ago. I was attending a lot of sort of practice meetings, and this is more aimed at women, because there's a bigger variety of what they can wear. Is tank top appropriates for you to wear in a Zoom call, or pajamas, and what I read is wear what you would wear in your normal day-to-day work, but if you're a Zoom call at home, you can wear one level less. So if you're wearing a shirt, if you're wearing a full suit and a tie, you can take off your jacket and just tie. If you normally wear a tie and shirt, you can take the tie off and just wear a shirt like I'm doing now. And if this is what you normally wear at work, you can go down to t-shirt. But I think if you're ever in doubt, the general rule for any, if you look at any advice that says what do you wear to a medical interview, is smart. It doesn't specifically say what to wear, so it does leave it open to the student. But the main issue is wear something smart and wear something that's appropriate and respectable work. And the interviewers always ask themselves, would I be happy being treated by this young person in front of me in 10 years' time? So wear something appropriate. So it's not like, you know, if you don't wear a suit, you're going to fail. That's not the case. So it is quite an open area. But would anyone else like to comment on that particular question?
Afif, I just want to add a couple of points here, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I think interview is all about impressions, and also the people who interview you, you need to be liked by them. They want to be listening to well, if you answer the questions they want to hear, then it becomes quite easy. So it's a two-way communication. But when you answer the questions, for example, people ask questions, where would you like to see yourself in the next 5 years? Now, you need to have an answer which is unique to you, because a lot of people will have a normal answer, which interview panel would have heard many, many times. Going back to the eye contact part, now I'm looking at you at the moment because I'm looking into the camera when I'm talking. And suddenly, if you ask me a question and I start looking somewhere else, or start writing something, it just takes the focus away of the people who are talking to you, thinking that this person is probably not interested in what we are actually dealing with during the interview. So I think the communication, which I mentioned earlier on, which is the unspoken communication, I mean, a lot of communication is done when we don't talk and we listen, and how we listen. These all little pearls are quite important to be liked by the panel, and also to stand out from the other people who come for the same job or the same position. They stand you out and make it easier for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Puri. I think that's all our questions that we have for today. You know, I want to thank everyone for being here today. It's been an honour having such experienced people on the panel. I'll welcome any concluding remarks from any of our panelists before we close today.
I think, thank you very much for joining. I would suggest, please, if you can share the Facebook live stream, whoever is watching us, because there's been a very useful session, lot of tips which we would like other people to to hear as well, who are unable to join us live. So please do share it with your colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you all. Thank you
Thank you.
once again.
Thank you very much.